All right, welcome everybody. We're going to do a quick ENIAC 40 update. I have my notes here. Okay, so this is not going to be a quick update. Um, it ended up being 18 minutes of updates. So there will be a shorter video linked in the description if you don't want to sit around for 18 minutes. If you do, thank you and enjoy the full updates and the bit of rambling that I've written down. I happen to be traveling this week for work. So I wanted to make this quick update. We haven't had an ENIAC 40 video in probably over a year, but after MRRF 2019, Indiana felt really inspired to get back to the ENIAC project and get some of the upgrades done that I've been looking forward to over a year. So just glancing here at my notes and looking at some of the things that we're going to do, and talk about some of the upgrades and MRRF itself. So this was the ENIAC 40 at the MRRF event. We were in the main building, and we had a table in the far corner, right by the Zesty team, as well as a couple of other cool stuff around us as well. You can kind of see the rail core in this picture right here, in the far corner. This is the bathroom right here in the middle, and then they were along this wall. And along with the rail core, there was a lot of really inspiring printers, not just Core XY or 2020 based printers, but just a lot of RepRap printers that were inspiring. And spent a lot of time walking through and getting ideas and talking to people as they were coming back through and looking at the ENIAC and talking to them. You can see in this picture, unfortunately, the LED panels that I had did not make the trip. I don't know what happened. The wiring was working, or the wiring was connected, but for some reason the lighting was not turned on. So I'll have to check the panels when I get back. But my son made the sign in there on the front, and hopefully we got some visitors, new people to the group. That's one of my quads in that picture there, the Philanosaurus BFF. Just for scale that I shared on that team's group. But the ENIAC is now, or at least my ENIAC is now running Clipper. Ran many prints through it. Really happy with the performance of the firmware so far. Configuration is super easy, far easier I think than Repetier. I still love Repetier, but I think Clipper is quite far beyond where it is. Plus, I think the expandability of Clipper. Please go read about it, and I'll put a link down in the description. But the fact that that you can actually have multiple boards within one printer, right? So you can have right now the Roomba that I have, and you can see that sort of like right there on the bottom or on that side. And then you can also have another ramps board. You can have another 32-bit board. I don't know what's the limit of number of boards you can run to one Clipper instance, but people I know in the group are running 2 to 3 boards in some cases. So I think that's pretty cool. Just some ideas, if I want to upgrade to 24 volts for the hot end, I theoretically could just run a board with only 24 volts, put the hot end on there, and eventually upgrade all the other electronics to 24 volts and run them off that board and kind of slowly migrate over. So I think that's pretty cool. If I wanted to run 3 steppers just for the Z, I could do it off of simple cheap ramps board. So let's go to the first upgrade, the Mosquito. Right, there's plenty of review videos out there, so I won't go in detail there. But I think the Mosquito is really, really freaking cool. The fact that the way that it's set up, right, and this is intentionally the Magnum because it's the one I bought with a .8 nozzle from a vendor that I can't say details yet because it is an alpha product. But it's coated with something special, so when I can, I'll give more details. But it's a .8 nozzle on a Magnum hot end with that's the BMGM, so it is the Mosquito specific extruder. The Mosquito is really awesome. The fact that it's smaller, it's lightweight, it doesn't have the groove mount that drives me nuts on the 3D stuff. So I'm super excited to get rid of that. Theoretically, we could run it without a heatsink fan, although I think I'm still going to keep that 25mm fan and probably put it in the back just like this picture, so you can't see it. See all that shiny copper there. And then the BMGM, the Bondtech people were super cool, really good to talk to, and very honest people, and just a really simple product, I think, that works really well. And that fits in with the ENIAC. And same thing for the Slice mosquito hunting too. Very simple and straightforward, and I think that's in line with what we always wanted for the ENIAC as a group as well, right? It's a platform. So really excited to get this going, and then we'll talk about how this is going to get mounted in a second. I'm going to save that towards the end. We'll go to the next one here, which is the wiring harness. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but this is something that's always really bugged me about the ENIAC, and actually a lot about other printers. And I looked at ways that different printers were doing it, right? And when you have a console where the wires are coming from the top, it's easier. If you have an i3 and the wires are coming from the sort of the top and side, I think that's easier too, right? If you run it like this picture is here, sorry, this one to the bottom, that core XY there, right? I think that's pretty cool. And then you have the drag train that's running there. However, what I didn't really like is the tubing. In that case, that tubing's for water cooling, so it doesn't apply. But I don't like the idea of something hanging sideways on a plane and moving along sideways and kind of based on gravity. I don't know, just something doesn't seem right to me. I've always liked kind of the vertical arch, which is the way that I have the ENIAC set up right now, and it is problematic, and it actually caused my print to fail on Saturday because the cable wiring harness had come down into the print and had basically been smashing into the print, just knocking the layers off from that front part, which I fixed with the pen later on and propped it up properly. But you can kind of see in this picture here, I actually had a couple people stop by and tell me to check this printer out. There was this printer and the Woodstock Delta, and really their solution for fixing the drag wire hanging down was a simple keyring. So to me, that's way simpler than, yes, it doesn't look, super cool, and it's not like a drag chain or anything, but, my pain with the drag chain is after you put the wires in there, it's a real pain in the ass to get them in and out of there and figure them out. So I do like the idea of a simple wiring harness like we have today, and then just using something simple like a card keychain thing to help keep it propped up. The other part too is you'll notice the one here, they just use, actually I think it was like a PVC pipe or tube to elevate the that wiring harness up above the printer, which is something that we don't have on the ENIAC, right? If we go back here to the side pictures, you can kind of see in this top right picture here, and then this one as well, some of the CAD pictures, close I've done, that the tube comes over the printer and kind of just hangs to the side, right? And like I said, I put a pen to stick it out further and it fixed it. Oops. Get there in a second. And so I actually really liked what these guys did on the right here with that 2040. I think it's overkill. And I don't want to add additional extrusions that you'd have to buy. So I think this, I'm probably just going to design a 20, use a 2020 that's off Thingiverse or something, or bring one into the Onshape model, or redesign a specific sized one there that'll be made specifically for holding that 2020 bar propped up like that, right? Maybe it'll be some slightly other design, maybe it'll be like a tube design, I don't know yet, but that's the idea, is that you have to elevate that wire harness up higher so that it doesn't then sag into the print, and then you have to use the card keychain to help reduce that sag. Again, you could go wiring harness like this, I just don't like it. So that's the other thing I'll be working on. And now let's move on to the cool stuff, right? So when I'm thinking about the BMGM and the Mosquito and how to mount it all, my idea had always been to move to something that was more standard. One of my frustrations with the ENIAC has always been the 51 millimeter spacing between the two X rods. That's not a standard size. I think there's maybe like one other printer that uses it, but if you search Thingiverse for 51 millimeter X carriages or extruder carriages, whatever you want to call it, you're limited. Of course, any of the Vulcanist Max, any of the Vulcanist stuff will fit, but it's not as common out there. Something like a Creality mount or a D-Bot mount or something off of like a Prusa. And so I always thought of, should the X rods be vertical and spaced in the same way as a Prusa, but that really goes against the, I guess one of the philosophies of the ENIAC was to keep the core XY plane a plane, right? And so that if you're going across the steppers in the carriage, it's all one level plane. There's nothing really that sticks out of that plane, and there's nothing that potentially could rock, forward or backwards. So that's why I never wanted to go vertical. One of the somebody had walked over and we talked about the printer and we talked about ways to redesign the carriage, and their thought was, okay, why don't you stagger the rods, and so that they're still potentially 51 millimeters apart, but instead of being side to side like this, there's now a bar here and then a bar. You can't really see it, but measure from the side, right? They're now like this. Instead, you'd have them like that, right? With the stepper sort of sticking out here where my thumb is, and that would work. But again, it doesn't achieve the platform idea that the ENIAC is supposed to be, where you have other printers. It's a platform where you can add other stuff to it. So that's one of the biggest things that I want to make sure that I wanted to address and fix in the carriage. And so this thing here to the right or left, I guess, the spool tracker from the G-Create team kind of got me thinking back again, as well as the Creality and all the 2020 stuff I've seen, was why not just put a 2020 as that X carriage? And Bill from our group, who's done an awesome job upgrading his printer, he's done that. Now he has it like the rail core, where it's actually riding on the top of the rails, which is not something I'm crazy about. Yes, it works fine. Yes, you get extra Z height, but it's defeating again one of the philosophies of the printer, which goes back to that the harness mount, is that really everything should be contained within the volume of the printer itself. So nothing should stick out the sides, left and right. Nothing should stick out the top. Obviously, nothing would stick at the bottom. But everything would be contained within the printer itself. So theoretically, you could put, like I did at MRRF, put plexiglass on the sides or acrylic, put acrylic or plexiglass at the top, and the printer would be self-contained and its own enclosure, right? And that's one of the ideas and things I've always liked about the design, was the printer almost becomes its own enclosure. So the idea was to use the 2020, and I really kind of settled on the idea once I saw these exo slides. And the reason is it's not like the Creality where it's mounted on one side and you potentially have some rocking issues. You have to make sure that your wheels are exactly tensioned right. The exo slide is really cool, and I can't wait till it comes out, because you actually take two pieces, you basically clamp them against the 2020, then you take another two at a 90 degree and you clamp them against the 2020, and now you have basically 4 exo slides, so like a box like that, riding back and forth on the rail with 16 wheels on the rail, basically in each groove instead of just 4. Yes, it's probably overkill, but the upside that this gives us is, if you think about the portability of it, or the modularity of it, the exo slide would be mounted on one side with potentially just a mosquito hot end on the front. Then you would have the back with let's say the bed leveling and the cooling fan. Then you might have the top part with all your wiring harness connections, and I'll talk about the PCB in a second. So you can kind of see that modularity, right? If the wiring harness needs to be changed out, maybe you can just take off that piece. If you wanted to swap out the mosquito hot end for a dual mosquito hot end or something, or maybe an E3D hot end or something else, you're not taking apart everything that's on there. You're just disconnecting it from the PCB or the wiring harness, and you pull it off, pull another one on. Your bed leveling probe is still the same. Yes, you might have to calibrate it again, but the idea is that you can easily change tools like that without going to a full tool changer. That's probably way down the road. The other part is because the 2020 is there, and again, as a platform, the platform that the ENIAC should be, is that really gives you the option to say, I want to use the Creality mount, I want to use a D-Bot mount, whatever it is, right? So long as it's a 2020 based X carriage, you could use it. And then you're kind of free to customize and go as you want, right? Which again, that's the goal of the ENIAC, is to build that platform. So I'm excited for these exo slides. I'm excited for this spool tracker because I think it's really cool what they're doing. Right, basically a standalone Wi-Fi spool tracking mechanism. It's still more detail to come, but I think it's really cool. All right. I'll bring up the PCB as one thing before we get too far. So the idea, the thought too, was on one of these extra slides at the top of the ENIAC, rather than having the wiring harness that we have today with all the different connectors, I really want to reduce the amount of wires coming in to that wiring harness, right? So there's a lot of redundant wires because there's several 12 volt wires, there's several 5 volt wires, and there's also several ground wires. We really don't need that many wires, and that's one of the hardest things about wiring the printer is the wiring harness that goes. So I think if we can make my idea is to have a PCB that sits on top of the wiring harness, a PCB that sits on top of the X carriage, and then like an expansion board, and then another PCB that would sit at the bottom by the whatever board you're using, right? And so you could easily just go, plug in from the ramps or the Roomba, whatever you're using, your end stop in, your X end stop, your hot end, right? They would just be the common connectors that you'd use, or screw terminals. And then you don't have to worry about, I just need the ground for this one. I just need the 5 volt for this one. The thermistor, I only need one because then I have the ground. You don't have to worry about those stuff. You just connect it like you normally would any other printer. And then the breakout board is the one that is then connecting it on the PCB itself. With either at the main PCB or at the one on top or on both. I don't know yet. But that's something I've always wanted to work on, as kind of a PDB breakout, if you will, for the carriage. And this video is getting very long at 16 minutes, so we'll wrap it up with the White Knight. If you have not seen this printer, definitely go check out Joel's video, and it's a really, really cool printer. But something really as simplistic as this pneumatic fitting and the refrigerant hose, I think is far more simplistic and less of a pain to work with than the nylon mesh that I have on there today. Yes, the nylon mesh looks cool, but I kind of like this idea of the pipe fittings that are just screwing into the plastic, and then the wiring harness comes straight out of there, and then there's another pipe fitting that screws into the carriage, and all that wiring is really hidden from you, and it kind of looks really clean with this refrigerant fittings. They're cheap, and I think they're really clean and much easier way to create the wiring harness than today. Plus, it's actually stiffer than the nylon mesh, so theoretically this whole folding issue that I have today is not going to be an issue. Okay, so that's it for the ENIAC 40 update. This video went a bit long. Thank you if you stuck around to the end. Hopefully there'll be more to come. I do want to thank Bill, Mark, and Colin. Right, I think without the three of them, the ENIAC wouldn't have not been possible. It's been a great community over the last 2 years almost. And I want to give kudos again to Bill for his updates, his documentation guide, Mark for the printing guide. But all the Bill really inspired me to get off my ass, if you will, and start upgrading the printers and then get it ready for MRRF. So kudos to Bill for getting out there, and I think it's a real testament to his ability to take something like the ENIAC as a platform and build on top of it. All right, that's it. Thank you for watching, and hopefully see you soon.